Yo, what the fuck is going on, you beautiful bastards? This is Beanie, and welcome back to another player review episode. I've been doing a lot of these lately, and not a lot of gameplay. Mainly because yesterday I wanted to get a commentary out. The day before that I skipped because, you know, I'm a lazy piece of shit. And then before that, they've just been coming out with a ton of content. And I've had to do these player reviews because you guys seem to like them and I like doing them. But anyways, I think I may stream later on today. I'm not sure what time, but be on the lookout for that. Check out my Twitter, USM Baseball 1, if you want to get an update on when that might be, if it might be. I think I will, but, you know, just get a time on that. Go check that out. But anyways, let's get into the player review. Tons of relief pitchers. So that's pretty cool, especially with this event going on. Okay, the first guy that we're going to review is the 89 overall Pat Neshek, and obviously Pat Neshek is crazy cheese. He has that sick-ass submarine delivery, and a flashback version is just going to be even that much more filthy. I don't think that this guy is going to be like a dominant guy. I think with this guy you're going to look to create weak contact and, you know, kind of control. He has really good walk per nine and control, so that's a good thing for a guy like this. He has a good sinker. I think he throws a little harder than his live series too. And obviously he has that filthy changeup, and his per nines are very, very solid for a guy of this ilk. You know, for a normal pitcher, 89, 77, you know, for a relief pitcher, that's not going to be great, but for a submarine guy, that can be very, very good and very effective for you. So I ended up putting this guy's fag at a 7.6. Okay, next up is Andrew Bailey, and this guy I'm not that big on. I'm not super sold on him. His stuff is okay. 72, 76 velocity and break. His pitch selection is okay. If you can use that cutter kind of how you would a slider, it might play up a little bit. His per nines are very good though, 94, 82, but I just don't think that this guy has the dominant stuff to really be you know, a shutdown guy for you. He might be somewhat reliable, but against top competition, I think that he might struggle some. But I do think just off the fact that his stuff is pretty average and he does have the great per nines to make that play up a little bit, I do think he's going to be above average for you, so I put his fag at a 6.9. Alright, and after him is the Houston Street, the Colorado Rockies Impact Veteran version, and I like this card. I am pretty sold on this card. He reminds me a little bit of the Drew Storen card, except he doesn't throw quite as hard. His stuff isn't quite as good, but his per nines are very, very solid. 88, 90, has good control and walk per nine and all that. He has a good pitch selection. He has fastball, sinker, slider, changeup. That's almost exactly what you want in a relief pitcher, and he throws hard enough. And he has extremely good break, very, very good slider, very, very good changeup. So with all that said, it's pretty close between him and the Neshek for my favorite out of this crop of relief pitchers. I think I probably give the slight edge to Neshek just because of the gimmicky delivery, but I ended up putting Houston Street's fag at a 7.5, just below that Neshek. Okay, and next up is the 85 overall Jim Johnson. I'm not a huge fan of this card at all. I would be a big fan of this card if he had better K per nine and possibly a slider. He does have a sinker, and he does throw pretty hard for a guy. He's a guy that has sneaky velocity. You know, you never really think of Jim Johnson and you think like dominant, you know, flamethrower or anything, but he kind of is, and he has a really hard sinker to go along with that and good break and all that. But the K per nine, I just can't get past it. It brings him down way too much. Your opponent's PCI is going to be really big. For a relief pitcher, you have to get at least like a 160 hit in K per nine. You know, maybe a little bit below that, but if you get too far below that, they're going to get hit too often to be a reliable option for you. The fact that he does throw hard and he has a good sinker and all that does make him play up slightly, but it's not enough to really get him above being just like an above average pitcher, so I put his fag at a 5.5. Okay, and next up is the Adam Warren card. Generally, I don't like to review silvers, but I will make exceptions here or there, and I made 2 exceptions in this video because I do think that these guys are notable. I think that this is a guy that in like an event or something like that where you're trying not to get your overall too high, I think this guy can be really, really useful. But he's, you know, his per nines are very average for a reliever. He comes in just under that 160 mark. So, you know, you do kind of have to deal with that, but his stuff is really good, and he has a very solid 5-pitch mix to go with it. You know, 82, 81 velocity with 5, basically your basic 5-pitch setup, 4-seam, 2-seam slider, curveball, changeup. He's going to, for a couple innings, he'll probably pitch very similarly to like a starting pitcher, but with a relief pitcher, you may want to get a little bit more dominance out of him, but I do like this card for a few reasons, you know, like driving your overall down, maybe a good BR pick or something like that. So I ended up putting his fag at a 6.7. Okay, and next up is the 84 overall David Price, and I like this card. This is a guy that I could really see myself using in certain situations, in certain, you know, like restricted events and stuff like that. This card is extremely interesting to me. 95 hit per 9, 88 K per 9. Very, very, very good per nines. You know, the lack of control and the lack of home run per nine is really what kind of keeps this card down, and I don't really care about those attributes that much. He also has 30 stamina, which is above average for a reliever, so he may be able to give you a couple more outs than your average guy. And his stuff is okay. You know, he throws relatively hard for a lefty reliever. He has good break on a slider, a decent changeup to go along with it. I think you can use this guy fairly effectively against righties. And because of that, I think he has almost as much value as the Neshek in the street, but I ended up putting him just below those two. Just, you know, lack of sinker, I guess, is my biggest citation there. So I ended up putting his fag at a 7.4. Okay, I'm not super hyped about this Luke Gregerson card. For some reason last year I remembered him being better than this. I don't know, I'm just not that sold that this is going to be a great card for you, mostly because he just doesn't throw hard enough and his per nines aren't elite. Like he does come in above that 160 mark that I look for in a reliever, so that's good, but it's not like, you know, whenever you have a guy that doesn't throw super hard, you want that to be really high, like maybe even above 180. You know what I mean? So the one thing that this guy does have is a very solid slider. Against righties, you could probably give righties fits just because that slider cutter combo. And against lefties, you know, his changeup is okay, so you can pitch to him somewhat effectively, but I think that if you miss with this guy, he can get hit really hard. Because of that, I could not put this guy too extremely high. Ended up putting his fag at a 6.5. Okay, now we're starting to get into the position players. The first guy we're going to talk about is the 94 overall Russell Martin. This card is like a right-handed Yogi Berra, in my opinion. Even the height and everything, like he's a kind of a short player. I'm not that big of a fan of this card, to be honest, but I do think that you can get utility out of him maybe in the future as a guy that you can put on your bench as a platoon option for a left-handed catcher. If, you know, they come out with a left-handed catcher that has heavy platoon splits, like think maybe like a Joe Mauer or somebody like that, that if they come out with a card that's like, you know, 99-99 versus righties, but maybe 85-50 versus lefties or something like that, this is a card that you could use to platoon with that card, if you were so inclined to do so. A lot of people choose not to, but this card could be used in that sense. He does have above average speed for a catcher, and he does have very, very solid defense for a catcher too, so that does bump his fag up. So I do think from a utility standpoint, this guy does have above average utility. Even if I don't think that he has a ton of utility as a starter, I think as a bench player you could probably get some out of him. So I ended up putting his fag at a 5.9. Next up is this 88 George Brett card, and I had a lot of trouble placing this card. At one point, I had him up above a 7.0, and I was like, no, that doesn't seem right, because he's a first baseman, and he's just like, he's a good hitter, but he's not a great hitter. But then I was like, well, he does have those secondary positions, so maybe I do put him that high. I don't know. This card was extremely tough to place for me. So he has very good contact, very good vision. So he's going to have a really big PCI. And versus righties, he has a good bit of pop too with that 70 power. It's enough to get the job done. Versus lefties, you might have to hit one, you might have to square one up really good to be able to get it out. His defense isn't anything to write home about. And outfield and first base is just such a loaded position, especially the corner outfield positions. So, it's so hard to place this guy, because if he had third base as a secondary or something like that, I would like this card a lot more than I actually do right now. So I ended up just sticking kind of in the middle of where I was going, the two extremes that I was going to, and I put his fag at a 6.5. Okay, last but certainly not least is the 96 overall Robinson Konoe. And wow, he kind of like the George Brett, he's kind of tough to place, but for different reasons. This is a guy that you would definitely have to platoon. Like, you would definitely have to find a really good right-handed second baseman to go along with this guy. I think somebody like the Alexi Ramirez or the Logan Forsythe or somebody like that. Maybe you could find a cheap option to platoon with this guy, but he is somebody that would definitely need it. And that definitely takes some value away. But he is unbelievable versus righties. For a second baseman, 99, 98, 82, for anybody really. I mean, that's basically perfect. But it's so good, and the fact that he plays second base, a premium position in this game, makes it that much more valuable to have that. And he also has great defense to go along with it. He has very solid arm strength, very good, reliable fielding. His reaction and his speed are a little lower, so he might not have the range of somebody like maybe Altuve or somebody like that, but he's extremely reliable in the field, and that also adds to his value. So how much does that platoon end up hurting him? And in my opinion, it ended up hurting him some. Like, it kept him from being, like above a 9.0. But it didn't hurt him enough to like drop him below an 8.0. So I ended up putting his fag at an 8.4. I think that that's kind of fair. Kind of in the middle, but very good card. A guy that I could definitely see sticking in my lineup. It's just, getting that platoon could possibly be a pain in the ass, if you know what I mean. But anyways, guys, that is going to do it for this episode of Player Review. I'm thinking maybe I might come out, I don't know, I'm either going to come out with a second video today where I'll let you see what the second video is going to about, or I'm going to do a stream. Like, it's going to be one or the other. I'm not going to do both, but I'm going to do one or the other just to give you guys a little more content. But yeah, guys, that is going to do it for this episode of Player Reviews. Please like, subscribe, retweet, share, tell a friend about this shit, man. This channel is growing at a pace that is awesome. I love it. Like, I love you guys. You guys rock. So yeah, guys, I will see y'all later on. Peace.